Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear and see us okay. It's lovely to speak with you all this morning. My name is Cara Graham. I'm from TWD Australia here in WA, and I'm the Inspire State Chair. I'm also joined today by Cara Williams. She's the Queensland Inspire State Chair. Cara, say hello.
Hi everyone, I hope everyone's having a great day. I'm the Inspire Chair, the other Inspire Cara over in Queensland, and I'm working with Sufficient Funds, and we're based all over Australia.
And we often refer to each other as West Coast Cara for me and East Coast Cara for Cara Williams. We initially met over LinkedIn because everybody seems to get us confused with each other, and we're sort of regularly tagged in each other's posts, which is a bit fun from there. But we're here today to talk to you, and now our first in the series of Inspire webinars, and we're talking to you today about harnessing your personal power and building your professional confidence. And we've got a couple of really great guests that we'll introduce you to in just a moment. But first, we'll start off with a little bit of housekeeping just to get that out of the way.
So there will be 1 hour of CPD available, which will be sent within the next week. Make sure that if you are the attendee, you are on mute during the webinar, and we will have we'll have a chance to do some question and answers throughout the presentation where it's relevant. Any questions we don't get through throughout the presentation, we will address them at the end as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, Cara. So I'll introduce the first of our two guests today. We've got the wonderful and incredibly smart Julissa Shrewsbury from New Work Consulting. Julissa is the director at New Work Consulting, and she's a specialist advisory house working with organisations on how their people represent themselves and the company brand, both online and in person. New Work looks at the brand culture connection, how clear a company's brand message is to its internal and external audiences, and how well their brand is expressed through its people at every level of the organisation. Julissa is a university qualified educator. She's got over 20 years of experience teaching people of all ages and backgrounds, and she uses her understanding of education and psychology and inclusion education programming to create and deliver exceptional learning and development experiences. She's been running her consultancy for 10 plus years, and she's just all around a pretty incredible human. Hi, Julissa. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Hi, Cara. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that incredible introduction. I feel really good. Great way to start the day. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to getting into some really good discussions.
Wonderful. Thanks, Julissa.
We're also joined by Olivia Maragna, who is based in Brisbane, a financial advisor and business owner. She co-founded Aspire Retire Financial Services in 2003. Olivia has made a habit of breaking through barriers and has been presented with the Hall of Fame Award for Business Achievement, awarded the Australian Financial Review Top 10 Emerging Leaders in 2014, won Winman in Financial Services 2013 Financial Planner of the Year, and the 2012 AFA Advisor of the Year, the youngest and first female to ever win the award. These significant achievements has made Olivia a fantastic mentor and role model for people within the industry. Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you so much, Cara, and thank you for everyone joining today.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being here, Olivia. Now, we're going to throw it over to you, Julissa, and sort of go through and focus on the self-development part of our webinar today from there. So I'll just move over through here. Now, Julissa, just make sure that you can control the screen.
I'll just see whether I need my view. Otherwise, I have the slides and share them as well. Let's see. Option to control. I think I need to share it myself.
Okay, I will stop sharing and you can bring that up. Thanks for that. Always a few technical things to go through as we go through this morning from there.
Okay, have we got the slides there?
Yep, the slides are there.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thanks everyone for your patience there. Okay, so I wanted to start with a little bit of data around what I hear and see from women. And I work both with women and men. And the data that I'm going to present to you today is more around women's experience of working in business and in their careers, professional women. But the strategies that I use and that I'll talk about today are equally applicable. So I'm really pleased to know that there are lots of men joining us today, and I hope that you'll find this a really interesting and useful conversation as well. So these are some of the things that I hear that women experience or that they see around them as well. So I'll give you a moment just to take some of those key words in. And I would love to hear from the audience as well. So if you're feeling brave and you want to pop some comments in the chat about what resonates with you or other things that have come up for you, I would love to hear from that. So if there are some things that come through chat, just let me know, ladies, and I will respond to those. And some of the things that I hear a lot of in terms of the self-talk and the comments from women in professional spaces include things like, who am I to ... who am I to do this or to try this? I can't charge more for my services because I hate sales or networking or speaking or social media. I feel invisible at meetings. I feel like I have to comply to certain requests. I feel like I don't belong. So these are real things that I've heard women say over the years. Now, these are some comments that I found earlier this year on Glassdoor, which you may have heard of. It is a space for recruiters, but it's also a place where people comment on the culture of organisations as well as the leadership and the management. And all these comments were comments from just one financial services company, which was really struggling, I think, in the last maybe 18 months with the transitions that we've all had to experience to online during COVID. But really unfortunate that some of these comments have come up. And this is really to do with power. So who is powerful in different situations? And sometimes the environments that we find ourselves in for many different reasons, not just being female, it could be that you're very young or new at your role, it could be a cultural difference, it could be a new place where you don't know people, but these environments sometimes can take away our power or make us feel personally not very powerful. When I think about my own experiences, I find that there are some where I felt really personally powerful and some where I felt I had no power at all, no matter what I did. I have changed careers 3 times and I have started 2 different businesses over the last over 20 years. And so when I went into each of those very different new environments with new people, I found that there were things that I had to navigate and figure out in order to be able to be influential, to be seen and heard, and to achieve my goals. So for example, situations where I felt no power at all. I remember once my first business was a photography business, and to build that business coming out of an education background, it was a completely different audience. I had to do a lot of networking, and I used to do quite a lot of event photography at the beginning of my photography career in order to really get seen and get out there at some different business events. So be out there doing the photos. And when I was doing the free sessions, I would ask for an intro as a bit of an exchange. And I'll never forget, there was one particular business event where the organizer had asked me for my bio, had asked me what I wanted to get across and if there was anything I would like to promote. And then there I was doing the free photos throughout the event. And when it came time for the formalities, he hadn't brought the bio with him. He had just basically said something like, "This is Julissa, she's a lovely girl, so yeah, get her to do your photos." And I felt really, really upset. I felt really shocked. I had done so much preparation into thinking, how can I promote myself and come across really professionally? I was working really hard at that event, and I felt that that wasn't reciprocated, that his end of the bargain wasn't kept. And when I looked back, I thought, what could I have done differently to avoid that situation? But really, I had a conversation with him. I'd sent him the points. I'd sent him a reminder. I'd checked in. I didn't feel like there was much I could have done to avoid that situation. And sometimes you just are in a powerless situation. A lot of the time when I've been in new situations, I have felt like what I call a little girl playing dress ups, putting on a suit, going out into the city, or, you know, getting online and talking to people that I don't know very well, and maybe doing a bit of a sales pitch or a presentation. And it felt like, even though I believed in what I was saying and what I was doing, it did still feel like a little bit of an act, and a little bit like, oh, you know, if they only knew that really, this is really tough for me. This is challenging and it's new. So, you know, over time, I've felt that less and less, but it's still a thing. You know, at the end of the day, I think we're still human beings, and human beings are not perfect. And I think really we're just little kids at heart. So, you know, that's a situation where when I felt like that, I haven't felt like I've had a lot of power as well. But that came from an internal feeling. Then there are times when I felt really personally powerful. And of course, that partly comes from experience and knowledge. But things like taking some time to really think about what strengths I bring to my work, or in other words, superpowers, I like to call them when I'm working with others. You know, that's something where if you really take some time to reflect on your strengths and why that makes a difference to other people, that can help you feel more confident and powerful, and that you've got something to contribute. The other thing that I've found has been really helpful in feeling personally powerful is if I feel nervous about speaking to an audience, whether it's a formal presentation or a sales pitch or even a coffee meeting, I think about the other person and what they need from the situation and what they might be feeling or going through. And when I take the focus off myself and how I feel and focus on the other person, I find that my nerves calm down, and then I find that I'm speaking from a more powerful place. So the reason that I wanted to bring these examples from my own experience up is because there are situations where you can feel powerful or not powerful, but that is a combination of internal and external environments. So in the examples where I felt no power, I found that it is a combination of external environments that I can't control, like the photography example, and internal environments that I actually do have some influence over, like how I talk to myself, how I think about my work. When I have felt personally powerful, however, it has been a result of internal work that I've done. So I've taken time to reflect on my strengths. I've taken time to think about the audience instead of how I'm feeling. So I hope that makes sense. Are there any questions or comments coming through? I'll just pause.
Nothing's come through the Q&A section so far, but I did just want to say that I love that comment around the no power, and I just genuinely think that some of that no power conditioning, it starts from such a very young age. I have an 11-month-old daughter, and I notice all the time when I'm in the clothing area in a store, you know, when all the girls' clothes have butterflies and princesses on them, whereas all the boys' clothes have all like cool dinosaurs and animals and adventure on there. And I just think it's sort of looking at that power imbalance, and it starts so young. From there, it's just become so much more apparent since my daughter came into the world.
Absolutely. And I think that in the world now, we're all becoming a lot more aware of the assumptions that we all have, the language that we all use, and what that says about all kinds of different people in a variety of contexts. So I think it's good to be noticing these things, and certainly with children, I think being mindful of it from very early on is going to help for sure, help your daughter. So Adam Galinsky has a fantastic TED Talk called How to Speak Up for Yourself, and it's one with like the most hits, so if you haven't come across it, I do recommend it. He talks about expanding your range of influence. He's a psychologist, social psychologist, and he talks about, you know, situations where we have a certain amount of power, either more or less, depending on our where we fit in that situation. And he says that our range of influence is mostly affected by two key things. The first is that you seem powerful in your own eyes. And I kind of think of this like the roots of a tree. It's the stuff that you're doing internally. It's the self-talk, it's the preparation, it's the experience, it's the work that you do. It's when you're sitting with yourself and thinking things through that creates that feeling of, I'm powerful, I can affect change, I can make a difference, I bring value in my work and in what I have to say. So that's sort of like the roots of the tree. The other piece he says that's important in order to influence others is that you seem powerful in their eyes. Powerful doesn't necessarily mean force or coercion or manipulation. Powerful just means that you're someone who is seen and heard and respected, somebody who is credible, and somebody who, you know, is able to influence in win-win situations. And I sort of see these as the branches of the tree. So it's what is external, what we can see on the outside, but the roots really do affect, you know, what you're doing internally is then projected outwardly. So I want to give you a few tips in terms of how you can work on those two areas. So in terms of feeling powerful in your own eyes, these are some of the key things that I've worked with people on and talked about, and I've found that it has been useful for me as well. As I said before, tapping into your superpowers. So, you know, really taking some time out to reflect on what your strengths are in your current work and strengths that you've had all the way through you know, your life as well, even as a child, that have served you and helped others. And then on the flip side of that, sort of kind of running parallel with that, in terms of seeming powerful in the eyes of others, that same idea of reflecting on your strengths, you can then take that further and build your personal brand based on those. So start communicating outwardly about that in different formats, in different ways. Remembering that it's not about you, as I said before, but it's about who you serve can really take the pressure off yourself. And on the flip side of that, when you are communicating value in terms of what other people value, or with them, what's in it for me, what's in it for your audience, or what's in it for the listener, then you are going to be more influential because you're coming from what they care about. And then getting clear on your values is something that's really, really, really important. And when I say values, I don't just mean morals and ethics. I'm talking about values in terms of what you care about in your approach to your work, in how you communicate, in how you treat others and how you're treated, in how you deliver your work, etc. So getting clear on that for yourself can make you feel powerful because you are working to particular signposts. So you're not negotiating on those things. And then the other side of that, being powerful in the eyes of others, is about communicating boundaries around those values. So if you have a value that is, you know, you in your day, let's take a really simple scheduling example. In your day, you focus on the most important tasks first and you don't get hijacked by email. That means that you are going to have to sometimes communicate boundaries to others about how responsive you are on email or on the phone at certain types of the day. So that's a very simple example. But when you start to communicate to others clearly and confidently about what you care about in the way that you work, people will fall into that. They'll respect that. They'll work around that. So in other words, you are teaching people how to treat you. And finally, practicing self-care and positive self-talk is really, really important to think about. And this can be quite scary. It can be a little bit challenging to think about, you know, how do I tackle this? But self-care is very different to different people. And part of self-care is that positive self-talk. So it's interesting to start to be aware of what you say to yourself all day long. And if you take just one day to do that and you jot down the thoughts that come into your head, you will be surprised at how many things are repetitive and critical. Most people, certainly high-performing people and people who deeply care about their work, tend to be very self-critical. But the problem with that is that it doesn't assist us to grow, and it doesn't help us to learn and use our brains most effectively So in order to be influential, to achieve our goals, and to be satisfied in our daily work, we need to think about how do we talk to ourselves and what things are we doing for ourselves, even simple small things like taking a break from our desk every hour or hour and a half, that sends a message to us that actually we're important, we matter, and our needs matter. So that's the underlying importance of that self-care, besides that it feels good. When you do those sorts of things, that then exudes confidence naturally. You are more grounded, you are more relaxed, you give off an energy that you care about who you are and you're proud of who you are. But on top of that, in order to be more powerful in the eyes of others, you can actively build your skills in confident communication. So that could be a range of settings. It could be things like networking, presenting, just on the phone. There are lots of different scenarios that we come across every day in our work, and there are things that we all know we could do better. So learning some skills and finding out how to grow our skills in those areas. I was working with one of my law clients yesterday, one-on-one with some of the team members. And one thing that we were looking at was how do we word things differently in a coffee meeting in order to move the discussion from something that's very social and general to something meaningful that's going to be useful and a win-win. So, maybe it's going to be getting some work or getting a new client on board. So, the way that you word things to turn the conversation around can really help you to make that smooth transition and make it comfortable for the other person and authentic, but still powerful in that you're moving the conversation along.
So we've just got a question that's come through, and the question is, can you give us an example of how you communicate your boundaries clearly and confidently?
Yeah.
Great question.
So one of those examples was around the email, which was a very simple example. So, if you don't want to always be sort of on call and people, if you're in a situation where you feel that people expect you to answer straight away or expect you to attend to their work straight away, then once you've got clear on your values about how you structure your day and how you work with people, it's about communicating those things. Obviously, when you communicate them at the beginning of that relationship, it's much easier. But if you're in the middle of it, so maybe it's with a boss or with a client you've been working with for a while, it can be a little bit more challenging. So it's about thinking, do you need to provide them with a reason, not a justification, but just, this is something that I'm doing now, and I just want to let you know, and this is the reason it's important. Or do you need to think about how confident your language is in the way that you communicate? So you can be positive and still set boundaries. But it would probably help me if I had a couple of examples from anybody of what you would like, in terms of how to communicate boundaries, what kinds of boundaries you're thinking of. So if there's an example there that you'd like to add, I'd be happy to talk to that.
Just thinking about it from my own context, again, sort of since my daughter was born, I've certainly become more aware of my work-life balance needs and how imbalanced it gets, unfortunately, sometimes. So it's certainly something I think that I'm continuing to work on. But, I think it's almost sometimes just like retraining your clients. So perhaps, maybe if you haven't been the best at boundaries, you have responded to emails on the weekends, responded to texts on, in the evenings and things along those lines. What would you sort of suggest if maybe you have been a bit loose with the boundaries and now you want to tighten things up a little bit?
So in the example of the work-life balance, if you feel that you need to inform other staff or clients that you're doing things differently, I think it's about working out the language you're going to use to say that in your response to them. So, I think some of this really depends on the situation and the dynamics of the relationship. So it's something that's quite nice to be able to work through one-on-one. But in general, I would say rather than a blanket sort of announcement to the whole world, this is how I'm doing things now, because that can be quite abrasive. It's responding to a particular situation. So it might be an email from someone and saying, thanks so much for your email. I'll come back to you on Monday. you don't necessarily need to provide an explanation. If anybody is expecting you to work over the weekend, but that is not, part of the deal, then, that's really, that's your choice, especially if you're at that sort of partner level, or you have your own clients. It's your choice how you choose to work. Most people are very reasonable and understand that you need a break. However, if that feels a bit uncomfortable because they're used to getting you on the weekends, then you might say, I am looking to spend a bit more time on the weekend prioritizing family, appreciate your patience, I'll chat with you Monday. So, being respectful, but at the same time being firm.
Great. Thanks, Julissa.
Okay, so I thought I'd just leave you with an exercise and a little bit of homework for anyone who would like to do it. This is going back to that strengths piece and the what's in it for me aspect of that. And this is something that I do with anyone when I'm working with them on personal branding. So you might like to take a little screenshot of this if you want to work on it after the session today or later on. I want you to think about, create a table and think about what you offer. In other words, what your strengths are and the things that you bring to your work. And then on the other side, I want you to think about why that matters or makes a difference to other people. What's the value in it for them? And you may really need to stretch yourself and ask why a couple of times to get to the real value that brings. So I've got an example here of my own. So one thing when I did my reflection a few years ago, where I really sat down and looked at, what is it that I offer that's, useful to people and that is that kind of my thing, the way I do things. And one of those things that came up for me was that when I sit with people, I'm able to help them quite quickly to pinpoint what's valuable about the work that they do. So when I talk to them about their work and ask questions, I'm able to find out what's quite interesting or even unique about their approach that helps other people. Now, why that particular strength matters to my clients and my audiences? Well, it helps them to build clear and confident communication, to be influential and to achieve their goals. And it helps them to feel good about themselves as well. So I invite you to do that activity when you've got a quiet moment. Even if you just do that for yourself and you don't do anything publicly with it, you'll find it to be a rewarding experience. Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Julissa. I just got another question for you.
Sure.
So what tips would you give introverts that hate networking?
Yeah, so I love the topic of networking because I have done so much of it over the last 10 or 12 years, in changing what I'm doing and meeting new kinds of networks and building those. I'm somebody who I'm used to presenting and being out there, but I would probably call myself an introvert at heart. I prefer a one-on-one conversation. I need my downtime on my own. I'm quite shy with new people. So, I really have to push myself, even though I've done networking a million times, every week. So networking, when you feel like it's a real challenge for you for whatever reason, needs to be something that you shape for yourself. So the first thing I would say is that networking, I like to call it network building, and it's not necessarily about attending events. And at the moment, of course, many of us can't do that anyway, not in terms of in person. And so, there are many ways that you can build your network, and it's more important to be strategic and to do your research and use, platforms like LinkedIn to really understand different people and how you can connect with them and have and set up some good one-on-one conversations, some introductions, etc. So you don't necessarily have to go walk into a room full of people that you don't know. However, if you feel that, you have the opportunity to do some in-person networking down the track and you think that's important for you, I certainly have found that to be when I've had the most serendipitous moments. I've run into someone and it's been exactly the solution I needed. They had something that gave me an idea, or they provided an introduction, or, someone who needed what I had to offer, and we just happened to meet. So, there is a lot of value in attending events as well, even online events where you have the opportunity to connect with people. But if you're going to do those sorts of things, think about, when are your energy levels high? So, I'm better in the morning or sort of early to mid-afternoon or late afternoon, but not late into the evening. So I know that if I'm attending an after work event, I need to get there early, before the room gets full, and start to talk to people and network. And then after the speaker, I can leave straight away when my energy has dipped and I'm ready to go home and I don't want to talk to anyone else. So being aware of your energy levels, arriving early so it's not as intimidating because the room isn't full, and thinking about, what activities can I do to build my network that aren't necessarily, handing out business cards in a room full of people.
I have another one, Julissa, that I think is quite relevant for a lot of, especially younger professionals, but super important throughout your whole career, is things like performance reviews and asking for a pay rise. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with because it can be quite an uncomfortable conversation. So how would you manage that sort of conversation, especially when you're perhaps stuck in that conversation where you feel like the other person's taken over and you're wanting to get that agenda across efficiently and effectively as possible? How would you manage that?
Thanks, Cara. So there's a few things there. So when you're in a situation where a performance review, for example, or an interview even, you need to have done this exercise that I've got here on the screen. You need to have reflected on your strengths. So of course, we do that when we prepare our CV, and your CV and your LinkedIn profiles should have a position. So they should be positioned statements. It shouldn't just be a list of the things that you've done. And if you've taken the trouble to think about your strengths, your past experiences, and what that brings now to people, or what it can bring in a new project or in a new role, then you're going to be able to articulate that much better in a performance review or a conversation about your work. So taking time to get really clear on that and writing out the language around that first is very important, so that you can communicate confidently. But secondly, you really need to talk about the value for the other person. So I had an example yesterday. It was more of a senior person, but the same strategy applies to everybody. This person was saying, I'm really good at communicating across the whole firm. So not just within my team, but, I know everyone. And, when I've got a client that we're working on a particular project, then if I think some other people can help, I'll fill them in and I'll invite them into the conversation. So I'm really good at communicating. And I said, well, that's really, really important in terms of business growth. And this person is more senior. She's moving towards a leadership role. And part of being a leader is being responsible for the growth of the business. But even if you're not in that space, if you are talking to leadership, one of their main agendas, of course, is to grow and sustain the business. So anything where you can say how your contributions add to, or can add to, the growth of the business or the efficiency of the business or whatever else, then you're actually talking to the value for them. That's going to be more influential. The other thing that you asked, Cara, was around if you're in a situation where the other person's doing all the talking and you have something you want to get across, but it's a little bit hard. One example that comes to mind that's a little bit different is a coffee meeting. So if you're in a coffee meeting with someone new and you have set up the meeting perhaps, and you have got some ideas of what you want to try and get across, but you find that the other person is telling you their life story and going on and loves to talk, and you're just not really getting an opportunity to discuss your work, then rather than just try and barge in with your agenda and push your sort of sales pitch, which is going to have minimal effect and feel very uncomfortable. What I would suggest is trying to redirect their conversation with good questions. So if you have prepared for a meeting with some really great questions that will invite conversation around how you can help them, or, something to do with your work, then you may then get the opening to start talking about your work. If not, you will at the very least get some good information from the answers to your questions that you can use to build that relationship or other relationships in the future. So having some great questions up your sleeve to take the conversation where you want to go is important. And that takes a little bit of planning and thought.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I think just upon reflection, I love the idea of being personally powerful. And I think from my own experience, I started out in the financial planning profession when I was 19, so quite a young age. And one experience that I reflect on quite often is a couple of years into that, I went down to Adelaide to a conference and I knew nobody. And I think one of the things I've always tried to do and be really proactive about is networking and getting involved, because almost like throwing yourself in the deep end, right? And yes, it's scary and uncomfortable and awkward at times, but I feel like I've had a lot of value from being able to meet people and network and feeling like you're personally powerful, even if sometimes you have to kind of fake it till you make it. I think it definitely has helped me. And Cara and I have spoken a bit about mentoring and our own experience of networking and things like that. So I know Cara's had a great experience with Olivia, so I'll hand over to her to chat about that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Julissa. And one of the reasons why we asked Olivia Maragna to join us today was because she was actually my mentor back in the day. I think it was about 8 or maybe even 9 years ago now, Olivia.
Seems like a lifetime.
It does feel like a lifetime. You know, a lot has sort of certainly changed in each of our lives over that time. And, you know, I personally, I reflect back on some of those sessions and some of the time that we spent together, and they were very formative in terms of my career. And so I do value them a lot. So thank you, in case I haven't said thank you enough from there. But moving on to you, and we wanted to talk to you a bit about that mentoring side of things, Olivia, because you are a very impressive woman, let's face it. And you know, you've really sort of led the way for a lot of not just advisors, but just women in our industry, and sort of really showed them, you know, what can be done in terms of the career. So, you know, perhaps you know, I obviously had the benefit that I was introduced to you by my business owner at the time. But if you're not so lucky, you know, how do you actually ask someone to be your mentor?
Well, I think it's well, for a lot of people, they ask someone else to do it for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. So look, I always say when you're looking for a mentor, you just have to do it. So if you're a little bit shy, or, you know, a lot of people don't want to be rejected in terms of, you know, not having that mentor say yes to mentor them, just approach it softly. You know, so maybe a simple email just to start off with to see if someone's interested. I would not be put off if, say, for example, you've tried with 2 or 3 people, you know, and it hasn't been successful, because usually, you know, a lot of those people are generally going to be busy. I think people are just generally busy overall, particularly in today's market as well. So like I said, you can ask someone. So you might have someone in the firm who you might say, look, you know, I'm looking for someone who can mentor me, or is there someone that you would suggest? I get people from all over. So people who know me will give me a call. They'll ask if they can mentor one of their team members. So it may not even be, I don't think, Cara, for you, I don't think it was probably initiated by yourself. But in terms of people will just say, look, I've got someone within the firm. I'd like to know if you can mentor them. Sometimes I get people from completely left of field. So they're not even from the industry or anything. It's just someone who's you know, known me. They might even have a child or someone who's just finished uni, about to go into workforce, or, you know, it can come from left of field. So don't think that there's a particular way you must do it. Keep in mind, like I've personally had to say no to a couple of mentees as well. And that's purely because I've been mentoring other people at the time and I don't want to spread myself too thin. So I think in terms of, you know, like I said, just do it. If you're looking for a mentor, just do it. But like I said, don't be disheartened if you get a couple of rejections. You'll find someone in terms of that support.
Definitely. And good point, Olivia. I've definitely been in a position where I've asked another female who I was absolutely inspired by if she was able to be my mentor, and just due to capacity and owning a business, she wasn't able to, but she was certainly open to me asking questions still, and just along the way, something a bit more informal. So that's certainly something that I've definitely benefited from. So yes, you can be rejected at times, but certainly for understandable reasons. When you do ask and you do have a mentor relationship set up, what are things you should and shouldn't ask your mentor?
Well, there's probably in terms of, well, I'll go through some tips that I generally say the shoulds and the should nots when it comes to being a mentee. So I think the first one is to have respect. And I think that goes without saying. So be respectful of the fact that your mentor is taking the time and effort to help you. I always sort of say, check your ego, or leave your ego at the door effectively. So if you've got an obsession with your own interests or yourself or anything like that, you're going to be talking about some really raw stuff generally with your mentor. So, leave all of that before you actually attend the meeting. I would say it's not an easy grab for information or to use them as a consultant. So just make sure that when you're looking at, do I want a mentor or not, or what am I actually looking for? Are you actually wanting someone to be your mentor, or are you actually needing help in terms of your business or something like that? So which is more like a consultant, because if you go into it thinking they're going to be my consultant and they're going to help me with everything, it's probably not going to work out too well, because it is a two-way relationship. So I always say a mentor should really hopefully be able to guide you and help you make your own decisions. I think sometimes that's the most powerful thing, because you want that relationship to be able to leave that relationship, whether it's 6 or 12 months down the track, and be in a position where you can actually help yourself, if that makes sense. So they should be able to help you make your own decisions, but guide you as opposed to doing things for you. I think secondly, if you look at expectations, I think it's really important when you're a mentee to have very, very clear expectations and communicate those. So what is it that you're actually wanting out of that mentorship? Depends on also what you invest in, but you want to actually clearly write that down and also let your mentor know what those are. So it gives you a little bit of a barometer as well to measure your progress. So if these are the things that I want to deal with, and usually when I start with a mentor, it might literally be 3 or 4 things that they might want to try and sort of get through or work out or solve or grow their skills in, and so on. And sometimes even one of those might take 2 or 3 weeks to sort of get through. So it's a go away, have a practice at a couple of these things, check back in, how did you go, and so on. So being very, very clear as to what your expectations are is really important. I think also being proactive. So if you are a mentee and you've asked someone to be your mentor, be really proactive in terms of scheduling meetings. So in terms of any relationships that I've had, it's always been, I'm going to leave it up to you, your time schedule. If there's something urgent, you want to see me much sooner or talk to me much sooner, book it in earlier. If you feel like you're trotting along really well for the next couple of months, book it in there. So I think just having that responsibility of making sure that you book things in. If you're unable to make one of those meetings, so I've mentored people all over the country. So some of them are in person, some of them are over the phone, some of them are virtual meetings, so video meetings as well. But if you're unable to make a meeting, just give them the heads up, because they're generally quite busy people in terms of scheduling or trying to find a gap and so on, but make sure you reschedule straight away. So come back with proposed dates so that you don't sort of lose that contact with that mentor as well. I think fourth, if I say sort of the fourth one is really to ask questions. And I think asking questions doesn't only demonstrate your curiosity and desire to learn, but it also encourages more relevant and I think a lot more in-depth conversations with your mentor. And some of those can just apply to, advice around work-life balance or, all sorts of different things. It might be a soft skill that you need a hand with or something, but asking really good questions is important. And you'll find in terms of, as the relationship develops, the questions will generally get much deeper as well. So it might be, I really have an issue with X or whatever it is, and, your mentor can generally help you get through those as well. Trust is really important. So I said some of the conversations that you're going to have with your mentor as well should be in confidence. So, there's that trust building initially where you sort of know a little bit about your personal lives and those sort of things as well. So respect that confidence and it should be reciprocated as well. And I think the last couple of things is feedback. So ask for feedback. I think it's really important as you're sort of going through a mentor relationship to constantly share the work that you're doing in terms of how you've improved based on, the tips or whatever's happened in terms of that relationship. But also be prepared to self-reflect. So you'll get feedback as well. You've got to be willing to sort of look within yourself to say, okay, maybe that is a limiting belief that I've always sort of thought about that isn't really serving me really well. So asking for feedback, being open to that feedback, but also giving feedback back to your mentor is really important. And I think the last one is just express gratitude. So I always find that I'm a winner out of a mentor-mentee relationship, because I think sometimes I get more out of it than what sometimes the mentee does, because it's just such a wonderful relationship to have with someone. But also just make sure that you are thanking them for their time. And, like I said, always check in with them in terms of, you talked to me about 6 months ago about X and it really worked really well in this scenario, and this is the outcome of it. So I think just, constantly sort of checking in relation to that particular mentor.
I think you've made some great points there, Olivia, and I think that ties in really nicely with what Julissa was saying earlier as well, particularly, around sort of, I guess, some of the respect and the boundaries, sort of having that own confidence in yourself, but also respecting others and their boundaries, and sort of setting those nicely. Now, I did want to ask you, have you personally had a mentor, or do you currently have one?
Yeah, I think I've had mentors since probably I was around about 22. And all for different reasons. So if I reflect back on my relationships with them, they've all brought something completely different to my, not just, I guess, working or career, but also from a personal point of view. I've had many colleagues from the industry when I first started out. I've had one outside of the industry, and both bring different things to the relationship as well. But I guess in terms of who I've sort of targeted in terms of mentors for myself, most of them are actually been quite older than me. So I call her my second mum, but one of my very first mentors, and still has just turned 80. So, wow. She's an amazing woman, and she's helped me with all aspects of various different things that have happened in my life. But I think in terms of, if I look what has each of them sort of brought to the party, I remember my very first mentor really helped me develop a relentless commitment to client service. If I look at that second mum that I just talked about, who's just turned 80 this year, she helped me a lot with juggling work, career objectives, personal life, and then there's been others that have just been really good sounding boards in terms of growing the business and so on. So look, they've all contributed, I guess, in different areas of my life. And valuable relationships, and a lot of them I still have an ongoing relationship with. So not necessarily as a mentor anymore, but we still touch base and talk to each other about various different things.
Olivia, you mentioned before, obviously respecting that relationship and not using your mentor as a business consultant as such. What do you find people commonly ask about as a mentee? What are their challenges that they usually ask?
Yeah, I think when I talk about obviously being in that mentor relationship, so not being a consultant and so on, but I think most of the things that I deal with mentees is, to be honest, a lot of it comes down to having difficult conversations. So it's, conversations with colleagues, conversations with staff, conversations with the boss, conversations with the spouse. So a lot of it is not just conversations, it's those difficult conversations. So sometimes it's managing, a particular situation with a team member. Sometimes it's, how do I get a seat at the table so I can get more involved or more input in the direction of a firm or something like that. So, conversations that I guess people feel very uncomfortable about. Mm-hmm. And even things like just really, really nice and simple, how do I break through to the next level, in terms of their career, are generally quite really common questions. And they're all great questions to have a mentor for, and to help you sort of develop long term. I have had a mentee who was one of my most satisfying mentees, and she had a severely disabled child, and that was really hard. So that's not something that I've had to deal with personally in my life, but it was certainly one of my most rewarding mentees, because we kicked some amazing goals. So despite the challenges that she had literally every single day of her life, and continued to, that was something that was, how do I, I've got this situation and it's not a great situation, but how do I still not forget about this career and what I want to do and so on. So that was really quite interesting as well. But look, I think the bottom line is everyone's different in terms of what they're struggling with. And I think in terms of getting that mentor, for yourself, it doesn't have to be, I've got 6 different issues and now I should go and see a mentor. Sometimes you go and you have a mentor purely just for one reason or one struggle that you've literally got in life. So, you know, don't think that you've got to have a whole list of things in order to have a mentor. Sometimes it's just, I just need that sounding board. I just need that person that I can go to if there's something that's challenging at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. I know I definitely found that very valuable, having you that was outside of my business on the other side of the country, you know, being able to just have that impartial perspective. And, you know, I can only imagine that woman that you worked with that had the child with the severe disability, you know, what a grounding experience and, you know, a good reminder about what you can be grateful for as well. Now, I encourage everybody to pop some questions into the chat, but we do have one from Dawn here. So Dawn is asking you, Olivia, what advice would you give to newer advisors of how to find a workplace that's suitable for them? What are some of the warning signs that it may not have the right culture or be able to progress them future in their career?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I always go look at the leaders in the firm in terms of, am I going to progress? So, you know, if, say, for example, if you're a female, but there is no one in the executive team or leadership team that's female, it's probably a relatively likely chance that maybe there's not that progression there. So I always go, you know, you've got to see, you know, in order to be, you've got to see. So if they're not there, is that a sign? And I would actually ask some targeted questions around that in interviews in relation to that. So I think that's always my first thing. And I do encourage, you know, firms where I see not a balance in terms of gender. So I can go either way, too many females, too many males, or whatever it is. But I do challenge business owners to say, you know, why not mix it up? Why not see the change that it makes to the firm and so on? So I always kind of go, start with that, look at what there is, and so on. I think the big juggle is particularly for females coming up through the industry, and we see it. So this is not a generalization. We see it in the research and the facts and the statistics and so on in relation to it. But it's probably that challenge of, as soon as family comes about, how do you juggle all of that? And I think they're conversations, again, that if you're looking at a particular firm, to maybe have those conversations, see what's going on with that particular firm in terms of, you know, what are people with kids doing? Are they finding the balance? And then I think it's just having, again, probably a difficult conversation, but a conversation that needs to be had is, well, how do you balance that? So does that mean I can drop my hours from 9 to 3 quite comfortably? Or does that mean I can take on less responsibility as opposed to more responsibility in order to balance it out until you sort of, you know, get a handle on how that balance is going to work, if that makes sense. The other thing that I think is really good, particularly if you're looking at looking for a new job, is to know what your non-negotiables are. So it's always an interview question that we ask is, what's your non-negotiables when it comes to work life, in terms of the workplace, the culture, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So it's something that, you know, we talk about candidates too. So we ask them that, but also we tell them about our non-negotiables as well. So I think it's really important to know yourself before you go into, say, for example, an interview, what's not negotiable for you. And that can be in terms of it, you know, lots of things, you know, not having an inclusive environment, you know, not working on weekends, various different things, but you can actually choose your own non-negotiables, be very clear about them. And maybe that's a question you can even ask a potential employer in the interview as well.
Absolutely. And Julissa, you know, as a sort of culture and brand advisor, is there any further advice that you would offer to somebody sort of wanting to make sure that they're joining a firm or looking out for some of those warning signs when they're joining a firm?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question, and the answer is complex. It's not always easy to know what you're stepping into.
I probably need to get you into the business to do a review, perhaps.
Maybe. I really, 2 things. So I really resonate with what Olivia said about looking to leadership. And another clue is, if you look online, so LinkedIn would be the obvious choice, but there might be other areas you could look as well, the website, etc. But if you look online at what the leaders of that organization are talking about, now some of them will be more active on LinkedIn and platforms like that than others. Their personal brands will be more developed than others, so you can get a sense of what they stand for and how authentic you feel that is. But if you see, for example, on LinkedIn that they are regularly talking about clients and client concerns, but they're never talking about their team, the development of their team, what they love about their team, what they're encouraging their team to do, celebrating someone who's got a new, has moved up in the organisation, or talking about leadership development as a topic, then it could potentially be a red flag. It's not necessarily, but what I find is that with advisory firms such as financial advice and others, some leaders, some partners are only focused on their clients and have not made that transition to, well, now I'm a leader and I need to be equally concerned with a bunch of other things like the leadership development of my staff. So I find that's very common. So that's one thing you could start to look for with clues online. I mentioned Glassdoor before as one example of where you can look up a firm and find out if there are any comments, but you need to look at that with a pinch of salt, because some of those comments can be very reactive, and it could be very much about one person's particular experience and what they brought to that experience as well. It's sort of coloured by that. So be careful there. The other thing I would say, and to your point, Cara, about, my work in terms of looking at culture and how that connects with personal brands is, when I look at culture, I think about how are the people in the organisation genuinely connected to the brand, and how are they encouraged to build their own brands as an extension of that, something that is genuine to them, that can help them through their whole career, but also that is about being brand ambassadors. So again, you can look online for clues of that. If you see very strongly that advisors across, or different, not just advisors, different staff within the organisation have strong personal brands that are brand aligned, but are also differentiated, you can understand something about that particular person and their work, chances are that their leadership has done work with them and given them opportunities to, grow their own brands and their own leadership qualities. So just some clues you can find online.
Julissa, to that point about personal branding and authenticity, how does one not pretend to be something that they aren't and not sound too promotional? How do you manage that?
Yeah, that's a very common fear. I sometimes talk about the common roadblocks to working on your personal brand, and the biggest one is I don't want to be too loud or sound self-promotional. I don't want to, have this rock star brand. The flip side of that is I recently got asked by a new acquaintance, you work in personal branding. What famous people have you worked with? And I had to disappoint her. That's not the kind of work that I do. I work with professional advisors and professional people in order to build quieter brands than that. So, it's a very professional brand. It's based on trust and protecting that. So when you're thinking about developing your personal brand, you do need to be confident in your communication of your strengths, but it has to be real. So it has to be what is really true to you. But you do need to stretch yourself a little further than just saying, I'm a good communicator, or I'm really organized, or have attention to detail. Those are just, price of entry. What makes your approach or your strengths helpful in the context that you work in, and how does that affect others? So if you can work on communicating that confidently, it's going to help you in your career, but it is authentic. It's about you and your particular goals for working on your personal brand.
Now we're getting pretty close to time, so this is probably the last question that we've got. But and I might throw this one to you, Julissa, but certainly, Olivia, if you've got anything to comment, I'd love to hear it. If somebody has perhaps, we feel like somebody's already formed a view of us, and maybe we're not being seen or heard, what's some ways that we can sort of try to turn that around and sort of try to change that image that people have got?
It's certainly challenging to change someone's opinion or impression of us when we feel sort of stuck in a rut with, you know, that power balance. But some of the things that you need to work on and focus on are, you know, those things I talked about before, the internal things that you can start working on so that you are more confident projecting outwards, you know, getting clear on your values and your boundaries so that you can communicate that when you need to. But also things like the power of nonverbal, you know, things like body language, nonverbal communication. So if you embody the person that you want to be seen as, the person that you want to become, you are on track to getting there. So how do you walk into the conference room or the boardroom? How do you present online in a meeting? How prepared are you to contribute in those meetings? How do you greet someone? How do you introduce yourself? So if you work on those verbal and non-verbal aspects of your communication, that's sending very clear messages to people, and over time that shapes how people see you.
And Olivia, and any other sort of thoughts or experiences that you've had around turning some of those views around? You're on mute.
Sorry.
We had to do it at least once.
I was going to say maybe just change your approach in terms of how you do it as well. So maybe the pitch to get that person to listen to you wasn't quite correct. So yeah, if it's not working, I generally say if the strategy's not working, don't keep on doing the same strategy. Maybe change the approach, maybe take it from a different angle in terms of, you know, what happens if they don't listen to you? So what's going to be the consequences if they don't listen to you? So, you know, you might have a really great idea that someone's not really hearing you talk about. So what is it that is going to go wrong if we don't actually start dealing with it straight away, or whatever the case is? And that might sort of grab their attention. Then you can sort of go in with your pitch in terms of whatever it is that you're trying to talk about.
So there's a little bit of self-reflection required there, perhaps. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for your incredible input this morning. Now, I did just want to give a quick plug. The AFA does have a mentoring program that runs from March to September every year. So we're coming to the tail end of the 2021 mentoring program. But if you have sort of felt that you could get some value out of a mentoring relationship, either as a mentor or a mentee, expressions of interest are open for the 2022 program. It's going to kick off on the 1st of March. So go to the AFA website. There's a mentoring section there that has a bit more details. I also just wanted to flag, and we'll include this in our summary email that goes out to all the attendees from today, but Julissa has a few exciting things coming up. Firstly, she runs the monthly free Q&A chats. So the next one is next Friday, the 27th of August. It's at 11 a.m. WA time, and there's some information that's available on LinkedIn. So we'll send a link out to that, and that topic for that one is from online connection to real conversations. That sounds very interesting and relevant. And the other thing we just wanted to mention is that Julissa does have a team professional confidence package. So obviously, you know, anything in terms of career progression, mentoring, networking, developing your personal power, it all comes back to confidence. And so there's a sort of package that she's got for businesses that offers some time efficient and practical motivating series of workshops. So we'll send those details out to you. But otherwise, jump on Julissa's website, and there's lots of really valuable information and also some good freebies on there as well. I was having a look there. So great website there, Julissa. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And today's webinar was recorded, so that will be uploaded to afa.asn.au. You'll also, as Cara mentioned, receive a thank you email in the coming days with a bit more information on some of those resources that we just discussed. And you will also get the CPD within about a week. So any other questions, get in touch with us or the AFA, and we can go from there. And thank you, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you, Julissa. Thank you, Olivia, for joining us. Have a great day, everyone. Bye for now.